verses 13 through 17. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell and make a profit, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But you now, who boast in all your arrogance, are evil. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is a sin.
Thought about coming up here. Well, Jacoby was trying to get up here just to freak him out a little bit, but Rick said before the scripture reading, he didn't say anything about me, so can't make it about me when it's not. 2017 is swiftly coming to a close, and we look back over a year, and many have said that 2017 is a bad year, that a lot of terrible things have happened. We have sworn in a new president in 2017 that has become a lightning rod for further polarization instead of healing and bringing people together in our country. This year, the sun was blocked out. You may remember that. Hurricanes Harvey and Maria made their way into the United States of America and left in their wake a destruction, not only in Florida and Texas, but all throughout the Caribbean and many of the islands. And Las Vegas became known for something other than sin and debauchery. That's quite a feat for 2017. You think about 2017 and those that we lost from our celebrity profile. Joni Cunningham passed away. I don't know if you knew that or not. Aaron Moran. Gomer Pyle. We lost Gomer Pyle this year. We also lost Tom Petty. Not all the heartbreakers, but it was a heartbreaker. We gained 2 new iPhones and a slew of new allegations of inappropriate conduct among entertainers and reporters and politicians and producers and people and people and people. And there's a little country church in Texas that has shut its doors, half of its members slain. No wonder to many 2017 was a bad year, but what I see in the tragedies and the divisions and the allegations and the hate, it has served really to highlight some of the greatest points of humanity that we see in life. We might say the best among us, from that random guy with a bass boat who was there to help take people to safety during the floods of the hurricanes. It's interesting to me, you talk about the Hollywood elite, that's what they like to talk, the celebrity status, and many of them have been identified as predators on people, and yet there's one name that keeps floating to the top as one of the good guys, Tom Hanks. I love Tom Hanks anyway. Always like to hear that he's still a good guy, that he is one who is marked with a moral compass that appears to be at least pointed somewhat in the right direction in a place in the world that seems that the compass spins wildly and no one knows exactly where to go. To the politicians who continue to uphold a moral standard for themselves. I always liked that Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States, was chided and mocked and ridiculed because he said that he will not have dinner with a woman all by himself that is not his wife. People thought that was hilarious. I think that's noble. And it's good that we see that there are still public servants who are willing to do that. Other public servants who are willing to serve and protect. There are many reasons when we look at the world around us, even in the midst of all the bad news, to say there is hope for the future. And certainly as we turn our eyes a little more inwardly, maybe not looking all the way to Hollywood or all the way to Washington, but just immediately around us. And as we close out this year, we look over what has happened in the Brighton Church of Christ in 2017. And there's a few changes that have happened in 2017, in this year, for the church here. And I think probably most notably, or most obvious, maybe not most notable, but most obvious, is that we have 2 new preachers, 2 new ministers. Carlos came back from preaching school after having trained to preach the gospel in the most effective way possible, to come back and start this new Spanish work, a fledgling ministry that is here at the Brighton Church of Christ. That's another one of the great changes, is this new Spanish program. In June, in July, I guess, Julie and I moved here to Brighton to work and serve with the church here. And so two faces in the pulpit that are new, although Carlos wasn't exactly new. Y'all knew him beforehand. But for me, many of you I met for the first time when we came in April. And so those are some major changes here in Brighton, but I think those are good things. At least I hope you look at them as good things, since it involves me. But we also have we had the newsletter work that was going on before 2017. But when Carlos was able to come back, able to start translating it into Spanish and reaching out in this Spanish program to go out into the community in that way. We've also continued to expand that program, mailing the newsletters to those certain addresses in our community, as well as a couple of months ago we started the New Movers program. These are all outreach oriented programs, ways that we as Christians, part of God's kingdom, can reach out to those who are lost. It's a funny thing to me as I stand before you each and every week and I'm preaching. I only have to look this way, and I see car after car after car driving by. I see soul after soul after soul bypassing, giving up, ignoring God's invitation week after week after week. We have an obligation to love those souls around us and reach out to them, and that's some of the ways that we have done that. And probably the most notable, maybe not notable, but I think it is, Al Austin was baptized. And what a wonderful, wonderful time. And I know that for years and years and years, that has been a prayer of many in this congregation. And so we're seeing good, positive things in the church here at Brighton during this year. But we don't want to sit and dwell upon all the good things that have happened here, or even bad things that have happened here. Dwelling on the past wastes too much of today, and it ruins our tomorrow. And so we turn our eyes forward, and we're looking forward to 2018, and it's that time of year that we start thinking about changes that we need to make in our lives. We start thinking about resolutions, how we're going to resolve to be better day after day in 2018. And we see that the future of the church in Brighton is, well, it's bright. It's something that we can be excited about moving forward and using the energy that we have. We are a church that's located in a growing city with new opportunities of evangelism every single day. I'm reminded as we were taking this list of the new movers that are coming in, about 200 a month. About 200 a month. That's over 3 people a day moving in to the area immediately surrounding the church here. We have opportunities to reach out to them and bring them in. And so there's this on the horizon, the expansion of the New Movers program to increase the potential. We've been mailing a card to them, but we're wanting to do more. And it's going to involve all of us. And so there's this expansion of that. And we're going to be talking about that in coming weeks, about what we can do as Christians in doing that. But beginning with the new year, as we think about 2018, we're going to start off with January. We're going to be talking about a journey of spiritual self-discovery. You think about some of the great characters of literature. It's because they've gone through a period of self-discovery, learning who they are. Well, we're going to do that, but we're going to put a little twist on that and look at what is our spiritual self-discovery. How do we find our place in the kingdom of God? Sometime next year, we're also going to do a series on Mark, the second gospel. And I think that's not sure exactly how many weeks we're going to take on that, but trying to get it lined out so that it'll be effective to us as we draw closer and learn more about Jesus and coming into His presence. And our visitors program, our visitations program is going to start or continue to grow, and along with these other outreach efforts that we're doing, as Dilbeck 3 back in the 80s, released their song, "The Future's So Bright, I Gotta Wear Shades." You remember that? I thought, well, this is a great song. It's a nice upbeat, peppy song. So I looked it up, and because I remembered it vaguely from my childhood, and then read that it was about nuclear holocaust, and that's why the future was so bright. But that's kind of the part of the song we didn't understand. We just thought our future was so bright. We were graduating high school. We got to wear shades. But in reality, our future is bright. The church here at Brighton has a great future, and each one of us has a part to play in that future. Each one of us is invited by the elders, by the ministers, by the deacons, by God himself to put our hand to the plow and not look back, and to use these opportunities that are right in front of us to help the church grow. You see, the church grows through our effort. It doesn't magically. Paul said, I planted and Apollos watered. God gave the increase. I know God ultimately is the one that's giving the increase. But it's on the back of Paul and Apollos and Sam and the elders and all of us working together, planting and watering and pulling out the weeds and doing whatever we can to let God's seed grow to its fullest potential. And so we should start planning now for the future. That's the good thing. There was a statement I heard years ago, and it's always stuck with me, is that failing to plan is planning to fail. When we don't have a plan in place, when we just say, well, I'm just going to fly by the seat of my pants. I'm just going to go throughout life, and whatever happens, happens. Well, what that's going to garner for us is failure. Failure to bring God the first fruits of our lives. Failure to help the church grow if we were just going to take life as it comes. Certainly, we need to understand that we should be planning, tapping into the resources and the opportunities that lie ahead of us, and plan to be a better church at the end of 2018 than we are even today at the end of 2017. If you have your Bibles, I invite you to turn with me to James chapter 4. If you had it open for the scripture reading, you should already be there. But it's an amazing thing. James actually gives us 4 keys to planning ahead. We're not going to actually put a plan in place. We're just looking at some principles to keep in mind while we are planning for 2018 and planning to do great things in 2018. And he begins in chapter 4, verse 13. He says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such city and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes." And we see in these first 2 verses here that one of the great principles we need to understand while planning is that we need to know what we don't know. That we don't know everything. You see, James is dealing with the sin of presumptuousness. That in life, that we, if we determine it, and we decide it, and we put it on the calendar, and we've gone to school and trained for it, that nothing is going to stand in our way. Forgetting what the Ecclesiastes writers would say, that time and chance happens to them all. You see, the race is not always won by the fastest runner. The battle is not always won by the strongest warrior. Time and chance happens to them all. That's Ecclesiastes 9. And so we see that just because we've planned and we've trained and we've determined and we've set our mind to it and we've dreamed of it, oh, how we have messed up a generation or two of people, telling them that you will achieve every dream you have. Brethren, we need to start talking about what is real. And what James is saying is, here you've got people who say, "Come now, you who say," he's talking to a group of people, and it's obviously Christians, because he's dealing with Christian principles. These are children of God who are starting to plan, thinking that they know everything. "You who say, we will go into such and such city or such and such town." You see, they have on their calendar where they're going to go. "And we'll spend a year there." They have on their calendar how long they're going to be there. "We will stay a year." And they know exactly what we're going to do. We're going to trade. We're going to buy and sell. And when we do that, we are guaranteed what? To get gain. And the irony is, James says, you're planning for a year, but you don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. We're talking about what we're planning for 2018. I said, I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do the series on Mark, because it's hard to look down the road, a few months, but a year, and to be so confident, self-confidence, that presumptuousness, that because I've set my mind to it, because I have trained for it, because I want to, I'm going to buy and sell, and I'm going to get gain. And James says, he reminds them, you don't know. There's a lot of things in this life that we don't know. We don't know how much longer we're going to live. We don't know how much longer the Lord will tarry. We don't know what the best stock prices are going to be, right? We don't know sometimes who our friends really are. There's a lot of things that are unknown and variable in this life, and so when we start planning, our planning ought to include things like where we're going to go, and what we plan to do and how long we plan to do. Those are solid principles, but we have to admit that we only have a shadow of knowledge about these things, because time and chance happens to them all. And in reality, what James is getting us to realize is that all of these things really rest in the hands of God. And what we plan can change because God has another plan. Right? We talk about how God may sometimes close the door, but He'll open another. Paul would say, I intended to go into Bithynia, but what happened? God called me into Macedonia. Right? We understand that as we start making our plans that there's a lot that we don't know, and so we are making a general outline. Now, some people like to come to James and say, see, what God is saying is that we don't need to make plans. That's not what James is saying. In fact, he'll later get to the point where he says, what you ought to say is, if the Lord wills, we will do this or that. He says you still make the plan, but you make the plan knowing that God, the Creator, is ultimately in control. Know what you don't know, or at least know that you don't know everything when you start making your plans. Secondly, in the second part of verse 14, when he goes on, he says, what is your life? It's the great question. There's some translations have, what is your life but a vapor that is here for a little while and is gone. Others divide it up into a question and a statement. What is your life? Your life is a vapor that is here for a little while and then is gone. But the gist is the same, whether it's a statement and a question or whether it's a one long statement or one long question. The point being that life itself is frail. It's fragile. It's something that we simply do not hold on to. We need to understand our frailty, not just our ignorance in some matters, but the second principle is understand our frailty. We may make plans for a year and not live to see them come to fruition. That's the truth. And some of us have to come to grips with that. Some of us are excited about that prospect. Paul wasn't he? In Philippians 1 and verse 21, I'm in the strait between two. For one hand, to depart and go and be with the Lord. He was excited about that prospect. To depart, that's a euphemism. You know what a euphemism is? It's a word that we use to make something palatable, because the harsh reality is what Paul is saying is it's better for me to die today and go be with Jesus. But he uses the word depart. He softens it a little bit. I would rather die. Paul was excited about death. We need to come to grips with that. We understand the frailty of our life. Life is not guaranteed. In fact, he compares it to what? A vapor. Some translations, ESV uses mist. Others, the idea of smoke or a fog, a thin fog. We a couple of weeks ago, we bought a humidifier. When you're from Texas and you move to Colorado, you have to have a humidifier. And we left it on one day, went to lunch and came back, and Julie said, do you see that? And it was like a fog in the house. We apparently had it on too high. You got to learn how to use the humidifier also. You can't just get one. You got to learn how to use it. And there was this thin fog through the house, and you can kind of see it. It's there for a little while, and then it vanishes, and you don't really know what it is. In fact, I even thought about bringing my humidifier up here and putting it here and letting you see the vapors. But we understand, right? We understand what he's saying. He's saying that it is thin, that it is fragile, that it's here for just a moment, and then it vanishes. We know intellectually there's still water in the air if you're talking about vapor, but you just don't see it anymore. We know intellectually that life continues after this earth, but we don't see it anymore. Life is fragile, and we cannot add to our days. We cannot say, well, I've decided that I'm going to go to this town and I'm going to spend time there for a year and buy and sell and get gain, so therefore I can't die between now and the end of that year because I decided I'm not going to. Jesus would say in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 27, which of you by being anxious can add a single hour to his lifespan? We're not in control of that. I like Luke 12 and verse 20 when the rich man, he says, you've been very, very prosperous in your productivity this year. And he says, I know what I'm going to do. I don't have enough barns to store all my grain, so I'm going to tear down my barns and I'm going to build bigger barns because I've prospered so much. And God says to him that night, you fool, for tonight your soul is required of you. You see, we cannot prolong our life just because we want to. We can't add to the hours of our day. Life, health, prosperity, none of these things are certain. That's the frailty of life. And when we start making plans for our future, it's if we live. If we live. Why? Because we are dependent on God. Look at verse 15. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. God holds our lives in his hands. Job would say, in his hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. To have something in your hand means that you have control of that. And he says that the life of every living thing, the breath of mankind is in the hand of God. It is in his control. Where Paul would say in Acts 17, he has made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling places. God is in control of what? Of where they'll live, how long they'll live, the period of their life, that they should seek God. That man should recognize his frailties, that man should recognize his uncertainty and turn them to God. That they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. It's interesting, he quotes from one of the secular prophets, but that secular prophet recognizes that there is a force greater than ourselves that holds life within its hands, holds my life in its hands. And though God is not far away from us, because we know so little, Paul says that it's this picture of a blind man who is feeling his way around and possibly can reach out and finally touch and find God, though he is not far away from us. Why do we look and feel so blindly? Is because many times we're so separated from God and his presence, it's hard to get there. But he says if we will pay attention and put our hands in the hands of God and recognize he holds our lives, then we'll find that he really wasn't far away from us at all. But we have to turn it over to God. There was pithy marquee sayings. You drive down and a church will have a little marquee out there and they have these cute sayings sometimes they're just annoying, but there's one you always see, let go and let God. When you get to the end of your rope, let go and let God. And what they mean by that is we get to the end of our rope and we hold on tight I'm doing what I can do, and I don't see any way through this without me doing what I can do. And the idea is let go of being in control of everything and recognize that God is the one who's really in control. Let God take control of your life. God holds our lives in his hands, but secondly, God holds our wealth in his hands. Job again, Job 121, he says, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and what? The Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Not only do we need to come to grips with our frailty of life, we need to come to grips with the fact that our wealth is not because I'm smart enough, not because I was in the right place at the right time, not because of my hard work and endurance. What I have is a gift from God. It comes from him. People that work hard sometimes live in poverty. Others live a lackadaisical lifestyle and haven't put effort into anything, and they're very wealthy. It's not hard work. It's trusting in God and recognizing he is the one who will bless if we will follow him. God holds our joy within his hands. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. This is a gift of God. Ecclesiastes 5 verse 19. You look at what the Ecclesiastes writers is telling us. He's saying, look, this is what God has given. Wealth, possessions, powers. These are things that people have to enjoy. God gave them to be enjoyed. He says, but rejoicing in them, actually enjoying them, that is a gift of God. When he says, we ought to say, if the Lord wills, that's not some talisman that we're supposed to, if the Lord wills, I'll open this door. If the Lord wills, I'll go to work tomorrow. If the Lord wills, as if we add that phrase, if the Lord wills, in front of anything we intend to do, that somehow God is going to bless that activity. What it means is that whenever we determine an activity that we're going to do, we know that it's within the will of God. Right? If the Lord wills, we can't say, well, if the Lord wills, I'm going to go to my neighbor's house after he goes to work tomorrow and I'm going to steal his television because I like it better than mine. Well, the Lord doesn't will that. And just stating those words in front of it doesn't make it somehow sanctified. We have to make sure that our actions are within the will of God and subject to him allowing us to live. If the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. And then number 4 on our principles is we're starting to plan for 2018 and making it a better year, a banner year for our souls. That's hopefully what we're looking for. Look at verse 16 and 17. As it is, you boast in your arrogances. All such boasting is evil. Whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. It's interesting here, if we just look at, and a lot of people like to cut it all, let's do 13 through 15, forget about everything else. Say, see here, God doesn't want us to plan to make money. He's against capitalism. And believe me, there's a lot of people out there who come to this passage to say those words. That's not what he's talking about. In fact, God's all for capitalism, all for hard work, for entrepreneurship. He wants us to work, absolutely, so he can bless us through those things. But he says what he's dealing with here is arrogance. That idea that I'm in control of my destiny. He says, as it is, you are boasting in your arrogances. It's not just that you're boasting and proud or you're boasting and arrogant. But your boasting is resting or founded in your personal self-confidence, your arrogances. And he even uses the plural there, not just the singular, he's using the plural. It's your arrogance. It's everything that you think about yourself. And that's we've talked about this. The biggest obstacle between me and heaven is me. And we've got to somehow deal with the me so I can get to the he. And he says all such boasting is evil. And if you know, as a Christian, if you know that you've got to put God first and you've got to seek His will and you're subject to His control each and every day, and yet you still continue to plan like the world plans without a thought of God, I'll just go to this city and I will stay there a year and I will buy and sell and get gain. He said, if you do that, that's sin. We need to know what is right. That's the fourth principle. Planning with God isn't just good, it is right to do it that way. When God is ignored, we boast in our arrogances. And James says, quite frankly, that's evil. The main character trait of the devil, that's evil. The evil one himself. When Christians emphasize God on Sunday, but relegate Him to the back seat on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday, and Saturday, that is evil. God deserves our preeminence. Colossians 1:18, that in all things He might have the preeminence. He would have not just a high place in our lives, not just the highest place in our lives, but God has the only place in our lives. He is the preeminent one. And so we keep God central in all our plans. We realize our dependence on God in everything that we do, and we walk in His ways, and we're prepared for whatever comes in this life, including the end of it. That's how we plan with God for a prosperous 2018. So what are your plans for the future? Not just for 2018, but for eternity. That's the real future. Consider this. The only thing that we can truly know, the only thing that we can truly control, is where we will spend eternity. That's it. Of all the things we want to control, that's the one we do. Where will I spend eternity? Heaven or hell? You don't know when you're going to die. You don't know what will be tomorrow. But you can know where you will spend eternity. And 2,000 years ago or so, Jesus came to give each of us an opportunity for eternal life. He came to open the gates of heaven to us. And every day, thousands of people die spurning that invitation, ignoring the offer of His grace. They spend thousands of dollars to build their homes, to get their educations, to start their careers, to find comfort in this life, but take no thought for the future that matters. The future of eternity, the future that begins the moment after death. The Bible calls that being nearsighted, who cannot see afar off, 1 Peter 1. It's a willful blindness. Don't plan and you have everything to lose, nothing to gain. But you can plan today to spend eternity with God. Plan wisely, and you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Please do not add to your sin this morning by knowing what to do in order to obey God and not doing it. Won't you respond to His invitation while we stand and while we sing?